Dr. Elena Rios stood at the observation deck of the Interstellar Coalition station, gazing out at the sprawling sea of stars. It was rare for her to be called away from her lab on Earth, but the urgency in the message had left her no choice. Essential for diplomatic harmony, they had said. The moment she stepped off the transport ship, the tension in the air had been palpable. Now, she stood face to face with Commander Thalzar of the Xarnath, a towering armored alien whose sheer presence could make even the bravest human hesitate. His exoskeleton shimmered in shades of black and gold, marking him as a warrior of high rank. The Xarnath were known for their strength, discipline, and uncompromising sense of honor. Yet here he was, insisting on her help. "I am unwell," Thalzar said, his deep voice echoing in the chamber. His golden eyes locked onto Elena's with an intensity that made her swallow hard. "Your kind is said to possess unique skills in matters of biology. I require your expertise." Elena hesitated, her mind racing. The Xarnath were notoriously proud and rarely sought assistance from anyone outside their own species. That he was asking her, a human, was both unusual and suspicious. "I need more information," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What exactly is the problem?" Thalzar shifted, his large frame moving with a grace that didn't match his size. He raised an arm, exposing a section of his exoskeleton. Strange streaks of discoloration marred the once flawless surface, glowing faintly in the dim light. "This began weeks ago. Now there are episodes of weakness. It is unacceptable for a Xarnath warrior to falter." Elena frowned, stepping closer to examine the markings. They looked almost organic, like veins spreading under his armor. But the glow was something she'd never seen before. She resisted the urge to touch it, knowing Xarnath culture held strict rules about personal boundaries. "Have your own healers looked at this?" she asked. "They have failed," Thalzar replied sharply. "They do not understand the cause. But you humans, your adaptability, your resourcefulness, these are why I seek your aid. I insist." The way he said it wasn't a request, it was a demand. Elena's instincts warned her that agreeing could drag her into something far more complicated than a simple medical mystery. Yet the scientist in her was already intrigued. What could cause such a condition in a species as resilient as the Xarnath? And why did he believe only a human could help? Before she could respond, an aide from the Xarnath Council stepped forward. "Dr. Rios," the aide said, his tone cold, "you should know that failing to assist Commander Thalzar would be seen as an insult to the Xarnath. We trust you will not let this opportunity slip." Elena sighed inwardly. The stakes were higher than she'd thought. Reluctantly, she nodded. "All right, Commander. Let's find out what's going on." As Thalzar inclined his head in approval, Elena felt the weight of the stars pressing down on her. This was no ordinary case. It was the beginning of something far larger. Dr. Elena Rios sat in her temporary lab aboard the Interstellar Coalition station, staring at the advanced diagnostic results displayed on her screen. The glowing streaks across Thalzar's exoskeleton were unlike anything she had ever encountered. Microscopic scans revealed traces of a substance that seemed almost alive, pulsing faintly as if responding to stimuli. It wasn't a natural part of his biology. That much was certain. Across the room, Commander Thalzar stood rigid, his golden eyes watching her every move. His posture was as unyielding as his personality, but Elena could sense the tension in his movements. For all his stoic strength, the alien warrior was deeply troubled by his condition. "This substance," Elena said, breaking the silence, "is not native to your physiology. It behaves like a parasite. But it's strange. It doesn't feed off you the way most parasites do. It's almost as if it's trying to integrate with your body." Thalzar's eyes narrowed. "A parasite. Such a thing should not exist within me. The Xarnath are immune to most biological invaders." "Well, not this one," Elena replied, folding her arms. "It seems designed to bypass your defenses. Did you encounter anything unusual before your symptoms began? New environments, unfamiliar species, battle injuries. Thalzar hesitated, his pride clearly clashing with his need to cooperate. Finally, he spoke. My last mission took me to the outer void, patrolling the borders of Sarnath territory. We engaged with raiders from the Zyran cluster. Their weapons were crude, their tactics weaker than expected, but I sustained minor damage to my exoskeleton during the skirmish. Minor damage? Elena raised an eyebrow. Anything that breached your exoskeleton could have been a pathway for this, whatever it is. Thalzar growled softly, his frustration evident. It is shameful to admit that such weaklings could cause harm to a Sarnath warrior, but your logic is sound. The timing aligns. Elena suppressed a smirk. His reluctance to admit vulnerability was almost endearing, almost. Well, the good news is that we've narrowed down a possible source. The bad news is that this substance is evolving rapidly. If we don't figure out how to stop it, it could spread through your entire system. Evolving. Thalzar's voice rumbled with a mix of anger and disbelief. You are saying this parasite grows stronger while I grow weaker? Exactly, Elena said, her tone matter-of-fact. Your body's natural defenses are fighting it, but it's adapting too quickly. If this was engineered, and I suspect it was, it's designed to target your specific physiology. I need more time to analyze it. But before she could finish, an alert blared through the station. A voice echoed over the comms. Attention. Sarnath Council Chambers request immediate presence of Dr. Elena Rios and Commander Thalzar. Situation critical. Elena and Thalzar exchanged a look. She could see it in his eyes. The warrior who refused to back down, no matter the odds. He gestured toward the door. Let us go, human. If this is a battle, we will face it together. Elena grabbed her datapad and followed him. A strange mix of dread and determination building in her chest. Whatever was happening, it was only the beginning. The Sarnath Council Chamber was a massive, intimidating space. The walls shimmered with alien patterns that seemed to pulse with energy, and the air was thick with tension. Dr. Elena Rios stepped inside, her human frame dwarfed by the towering Sarnath warriors seated around the semicircular council table. At the center stood Commander Thalzar, his powerful frame looking slightly less unyielding under the weight of his illness. A Sarnath elder, clad in ceremonial armor, rose to address the room. His voice boomed like a thunderclap. We have called this meeting because Commander Thalzar's condition may affect not only him but the safety of our people. Dr. Rios, human xenobiologist, you will explain what you have discovered. Elena felt every pair of golden eyes on her, their intensity piercing. She took a steadying breath and stepped forward. Commander Thalzar's condition is caused by a parasitic substance that appears to be bioengineered. It's not natural, and it's designed specifically to target Sarnath biology. A low rumble of discontent swept through the chamber. One of the council members slammed a fist on the table. Impossible. No species possesses the knowledge to tamper with our biology. You insult us, human. Elena held her ground, refusing to be intimidated. With all due respect, the evidence speaks for itself. My scans show this parasite adapting rapidly to his immune system. It was engineered to infiltrate your physiology, something your natural defenses can't counter. But humans, we have experience with parasites and biological warfare. That's why I believe I can help. Another council member leaned forward, his glowing eyes narrowing. And why should we trust humans? Your species is new to the coalition, untested in matters of great importance. Before Elena could answer, Thalzar's deep voice cut through the room. Enough. His tone carried the weight of a warrior who commanded respect. Dr. Rios speaks the truth. I sought her assistance because I know human ingenuity is unmatched. Their species adapts to challenges where others falter. If we are to find a solution, it will be through her efforts. Elena blinked, surprised by the unexpected defense. She wasn't used to hearing praise from someone as proud as Thalzar. The council murmured among themselves, their doubts slightly tempered by his endorsement. The elder raised a hand, silencing the room. "And what of this parasite's origin, Dr. Rios? Have you determined who might have created it?" "Not yet," Elena admitted, feeling the weight of the room's expectations. "But the parasite's genetic markers don't match anything in the Coalition's databases. Whoever created it knew enough about your species to exploit its vulnerabilities. This wasn't a random act. It was deliberate." The elder's glowing gaze fixed on her. "And you believe humans have the capability to counter such a weapon?" Elena straightened her posture, meeting his gaze. "Yes, humans are experts in adaptability and innovation. If you give me the resources and time, I'll find a way to neutralize it." The room fell silent. Finally, the elder nodded. "Very well, human. The council will grant you access to our medical archives. But know this, failure is not an option. The honor of the Xarnath depends on it." As the meeting adjourned, Thalzar stepped closer to Elena, his voice low. "You have much to prove, human. Do not fail me." Elena tightened her grip on her datapad and nodded. "I won't. Now let's get to work." And with that, the real battle began. Dr. Elena Rios worked tirelessly in the station's laboratory, her focus unshaken despite the weight of the Xarnath Council's expectations. The scans of Thalzar's condition revealed something troubling. The parasite was evolving faster than her preliminary estimates. It was almost as if it could anticipate and counter her every move. Across the room, Thalzar stood like a statue, watching her every step. His towering presence filled the space, a constant reminder of the stakes. Despite his visible illness, his faintly glowing streaks now spreading further across his exoskeleton. His posture remained proud and unyielding. "Elena," Thalzar said abruptly, breaking the silence. His voice, though commanding, carried a tinge of frustration. "You have been at this for hours. What have you discovered?" Elena turned to face him, irritation flashing in her eyes. "I've discovered that you're impatient," she shot back, before immediately softening her tone. "Look, science doesn't work on your timetable, Commander. If you want me to solve this, you're going to have to let me do my job." Thalzar's jaw tightened. A Xarnath warrior does not sit idly while danger looms. This parasite is a stain upon my honor. To be weakened like this, it is unacceptable. Elena sighed, leaning against the counter for a moment. "You think I don't get it. I understand how much pride means to you, but this isn't about pride. It's about survival. If we don't figure this out soon, you'll have more to worry about than your honor." Thalzar's golden eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned away, pacing the length of the room. His movements, usually fluid and controlled, now seemed stiff. The parasite was clearly taking a toll, though he would never admit it aloud. After a moment, Elena's voice softened. "Thalzar," she said, her tone more empathetic. "Your body is fighting as hard as it can, but it can't win this alone. That's why I'm here. Humans have had to deal with things like this for centuries. Diseases, parasites, even bioengineered threats. We've survived because we learned to adapt. If you want to survive this, you'll need to trust me." Thalzar stopped pacing and turned to face her. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the lab equipment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Trust does not come easily to my kind, but you have earned the beginnings of it. Do what you must." Encouraged, Elena returned to her work. Hours passed as she analyzed the parasite's structure, searching for a vulnerability. Finally, she found something. A trace of an alien compound embedded in the parasite's genetic code. It wasn't native to Xarnath biology, but it wasn't entirely unfamiliar to human databases either. Elena looked up at Thalzar, her eyes alight with determination. "I think I found a lead. This compound might hold the key to stopping the parasite, but it's going to take more work. And we'll need to act fast." Thalzar stepped closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over her workstation. "Then we act." Tell me what is needed, and I will ensure it is done. Alina nodded, the weight of the task ahead heavy but not impossible. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Together, they might just have a chance. The lab was dimly lit, save for the glow of holographic screens displaying Thalzar's biological data. Dr. Elena Rios stared at the compound she had identified in the parasite's genetic structure. It was like a signature left behind by its creator, alien but disturbingly familiar. She leaned forward, her fingers gliding over the control panel to pull up old Coalition research archives. Thalzar stood nearby, arms crossed over his broad chest, watching her work in silence. The streaks of glowing discoloration on his exoskeleton had spread further, but he made no mention of his worsening condition. If the parasite was winning, he was too proud to show it. Alina, he finally said, breaking the silence. You have found something, yes? She turned toward him, her face a mix of excitement and concern. I think so. This compound. She gestured to the screen, where molecular diagrams floated in the air. It's not just a random element. It's engineered, and the markers match something from Coalition research logs. It's linked to a species in the outer void, the Xiren faction. Thalzar's golden eyes narrowed at the name. Xyrens. They are scavengers, raiders, cowards who strike from the shadows and flee when confronted. Well, apparently they're more than just scavengers, Alina said. This parasite's design shows intelligence, precision. It's made to target Sarnath biology specifically, which means they know a lot about your physiology. Too much. Thalzar's jaw tightened. It is a weapon. Yes, Alina agreed. And you were the test subject. The realization hit them both like a blow. The parasite wasn't just a random biological anomaly. It was part of a deliberate plan. The Xyrens had used Thalzar, one of the most powerful Sarnath warriors, as a live experiment to test their bioengineered weapon. If they succeeded, they could unleash it on the Sarnath as a whole, crippling their species. This cannot be allowed to continue, Thalzar growled, his deep voice filled with fury. The Xyrens must answer for this dishonor. Alina placed a hand on her desk to steady herself. We need proof. I found traces of the Xiren markers in the parasite, but that won't be enough to convince the Coalition to act. We need to find the source, where they're creating this thing, and shut it down before it spreads. Thalzar stepped closer, his towering presence radiating determination. Then we will find them. I will not allow this cowardly attack to bring shame to my people. Alina hesitated. You're not exactly in fighting shape, Commander. The parasite is still evolving, and I haven't finished synthesizing a treatment. If you push yourself too far. I am Sarnath, Thalzar interrupted, his tone firm. I will endure. Alina sighed. Fine, but if we're going to track the Xyrens, I need full access to Coalition intelligence on their movements, and I'll need your help to get it. You will have it, Thalzar said without hesitation. Prepare yourself, human. The hunt begins. As they left the lab, Alina felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just a medical mystery anymore. It was a battle for survival. And they were heading straight into the heart of the storm. The space station's transport ship hummed softly as it glided through the vast expanse of space, heading toward the outer reaches of the Coalition's territory. Dr. Elena Rios sat across from Thalzar, reviewing the data she had collected on the Xiren faction. Their movements were unpredictable, and the more Elena studied their tactics, the clearer it became that they operated in the shadows, raiding, disappearing, and never staying in one place long enough to be tracked. Thalzar remained silent, his golden eyes narrowed in concentration. His condition had stabilized somewhat, but the parasite's presence still lingered, weakening him with every passing moment. Despite this, the warrior's resolve was unbroken. We are close, Alina said, glancing at him. I've pinpointed a likely location for this Xiren base. It's near a gas nebula, just outside our borders. We'll need to approach carefully. They're known to set traps. Thalzar's lips curled into something resembling a smile, though it was more a show of determination than amusement. I will deal with their traps. You focus on what you do best. Elena wasn't sure if she should feel comforted or worried by his words. She didn't know much about military strategy, but it was clear that Thalzar trusted in his own strength far more than he trusted anything else. Still, they had no choice but to rely on his warrior instincts. The ship continued its course, and Elena's thoughts drifted back to the parasite. The more she worked on synthesizing a cure, the more she realized that the Zerans had likely used human technology to create it. The similarities were too striking to ignore. If she was right, then whoever had designed the parasite was familiar with the human race and its ability to adapt quickly. She was snapped from her thoughts by a sudden, sharp beep from the ship's navigation system. "What was that?" she asked, eyes wide. Thalzar stiffened, his keen senses alert. "It's a warning signal. We're being targeted." Before Elena could respond, the lights in the ship flickered, and a loud explosion shook the vessel. The ship lurched violently, and Elena was thrown against the wall, her vision blurring. She gasped for air, struggling to stay conscious. Thalzar was already up, his massive frame moving with the grace of a predator. He grabbed her by the arm, pulling her to her feet. "Get to the cockpit. Now." Elena barely had time to react before Thalzar was dragging her toward the front of the ship. Another explosion rocked the vessel, and Elena could hear the sound of blaster fire outside the ship. They were under attack, and it wasn't by any ordinary force. The cockpit was just ahead when the ship shuddered again. Elena stumbled, but Thalzar's grip remained firm. They burst into the cockpit, and Elena immediately took control of the navigation system, trying to stabilize the ship. "Who's attacking us?" she asked breathlessly. "They are Zyrans," Thalzar said, his voice cold and deadly. "They'd followed us. Prepare for a fight." Elena's heart raced. The Zyrans had been waiting for them. They had planned to destroy them before they could reach the base. The Zyrans' ruthless tactics were clear now. They wouldn't let them reach their goal without a fight. Thalzar turned to her, his golden eyes locked on hers. "Stay focused, human. You get the ship in order, and I'll handle the rest." Elena's hands flew over the controls, trying to regain control of the ship, while Thalzar readied himself for battle. The war between the Xarnath and the Zyrans had just become very personal. With a deep breath, Elena steeled herself. The fight for survival was only beginning. The ship groaned under the stress of the battle as Zyran blaster fire continued to strike its hull. Dr. Elena Rios kept her hand steady on the controls, trying to keep the vessel from spiraling into the vast emptiness of space. Despite the chaos outside, her focus was sharp. The ship's warning systems blared, but she ignored them, her mind racing through options. They couldn't afford to be taken down here. Not now. Behind her, Commander Thalzar was preparing for the worst. His muscular frame seemed to swell with a warrior's energy, his every movement exuding raw power. Even in his weakened state, the Xarnath warrior was a force to be reckoned with. "Elena," Thalzar said, his voice calm despite the pressure, "this battle is not one we can fight alone. We need to call for backup." "I'm trying to get the comms working," Elena responded, her voice tight with tension. "The Zyrans are jamming the signal, but I'll break through." Thalzar's golden eyes gleamed with determination. "Then do it. The Zyrans will not let us escape. We must have reinforcements." Elena nodded, her mind working quickly. The ship's comms were offline, but there was another way to send a distress signal. She tapped a few commands on the console, rerouting power from the shields to the communication systems. The ship shuddered again as another blast hit its side, but Elena didn't flinch. She had to make this work. Meanwhile, Thalzar moved toward the airlock. He grabbed a blaster rifle from the ship's storage unit, his movements swift and purposeful. He turned to Elena. "I will hold them off while you finish your work. Stay safe." Elena felt a pang of fear, but she didn't let it show. She understood the warrior's nature. For him, Honor came before all else, and he would fight to the death if it meant protecting her or the mission. "Be careful," she said, her voice soft but urgent. Thalzar's lips twitched, a brief smile crossing his face. "I am always careful, human." With that, he strode toward the airlock, and Elena's fingers flew across the console once again. The ship was under heavy fire, but her focus remained on sending out a signal. Just as another blast rocked the ship, the console beeped in success. "I've got it," Elena shouted. "I sent the distress signal to the Coalition fleet. They'll be here within minutes." But just as she spoke, a loud clang echoed through the ship. Elena turned to see the door to the airlock open, revealing a group of Ziran soldiers. Their slim, almost insectoid forms glimmered in the dim light of the ship, their weapons aimed directly at Thalzar. "You are brave to stand against us, Sarnath," the lead Ziran said, its voice like the hiss of a serpent. "But you will not survive." Thalzar didn't flinch. "Then come and try, Ziran." Elena's heart pounded in her chest. She knew Thalzar could handle himself, but the odds were stacked against them. They were outnumbered, and the parasite still weakened him. She couldn't let him fight alone. Without thinking, Elena grabbed the emergency blaster from the ship's rack and rushed toward the airlock. She wasn't a soldier, but she had learned a few things from Thalzar. She would fight, too. She couldn't let him face this enemy alone. As the Zirans advanced, Elena's pulse raced. She raised the blaster, trying to steady her shaking hands. "Stay back," she shouted, aiming the weapon at the nearest Ziran. The Zirans paused, surprised by her sudden appearance. Thalzar took advantage of the distraction. In one fluid motion, he lunged forward, his massive form crashing into the first Ziran, sending it sprawling. The battle was on. The air inside the ship was thick with tension as Elena and Thalzar fought side by side against the Ziran soldiers. The once sleek, fast-moving vessel was now a war zone, with blaster fire and the sound of combat echoing through its hallways. Elena's heart pounded in her chest, but her hands were steady as she fired the blaster again, knocking down another Ziran soldier. Thalzar was a whirlwind of strength and skill. Even in his weakened state, he moved with terrifying speed and precision. His massive frame swung with expert force, knocking Zirans aside as though they were nothing more than obstacles in his path. Elena ducked behind a console as the ship shook from another blast. The Zirans were relentless, and the ship's shields were barely holding up. She quickly peeked around the corner and fired again, but the Zirans seemed to be adapting. They were learning how to counter their moves, and the tide of the battle was turning against them. "Thalzar," Elena shouted over the chaos. "We need to end this now. I've almost finished developing the cure for your condition, but we don't have much time. If we don't stop them, you'll be too weak to fight." The warrior paused for a split second, his golden eyes flashing toward her. "The cure," he rumbled, his voice strained. "You've found a way to stop the parasite." "I think so," Elena replied, her voice tight with worry. "But the treatment is risky. It could neutralize the parasite, but there's a side effect. It could also weaken your natural healing abilities permanently. If you take it, you may never fully recover your strength." Thalzar's gaze never wavered. He stood tall, despite the weakening effect of the parasite still working within him. "Then I will endure it. My strength is nothing if I cannot protect those I care for. I will take the risk." Elena felt a surge of admiration for the warrior. Despite the danger to his own body, he was ready to sacrifice everything to ensure their survival and to stop the Zirans. She knew that this wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about honor, pride, and a fierce loyalty to his people. "We'll do it," Elena said, her voice firm. "But we have to act quickly. Once I give you the cure, we won't have time to waste. The Zirans will be on us in full force, and we need to get to the control room to stop their attack before it's too late." Thalzar nodded, understanding the urgency. Without another word, he dropped his blaster to the floor and moved toward her, his massive body almost a blur of motion. Elena quickly prepared the cure, a small vial of a glowing liquid that pulsed with energy. As she approached him, her hands shaking with the weight of the decision she was about to make, she looked into his eyes one last time. "I hope this works," she said softly, her voice full of both hope and fear. Falzar gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I trust you, human. Do it." Without hesitation, Elena injected the liquid into Falzar's arm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as the liquid spread through his system, his entire body stiffened, and he let out a low growl of pain. The glow from the parasite's markings dimmed, but the side effects were already starting to show. His movements became slower, his once vibrant exoskeleton dulling. Elena watched with bated breath, her heart pounding. Would he survive this? Would the cure work? Slowly, Falzar took a deep breath, his strength returning, albeit more slowly than before. He looked at her, his eyes full of quiet gratitude. "It is done," he said, his voice rough but steady. The battle outside raged on, but for a moment, Elena and Falzar stood together, united in their fight. Whatever came next, they would face it head-on. There was no turning back now. The air was thick with tension as the ship entered the Zyran base. The once pristine corridors were now a war zone, strewn with debris from their earlier skirmishes. Elena and Falzar had made it through the worst of the battle, but now they were heading straight into the heart of the Zyran operation, the place where the parasite had been created. They couldn't afford to fail. The ship had landed in a hidden docking bay, far from the main base, where they had been able to slip past the Zyran defenses. Elena knew that they had no time to waste. The Coalition's reinforcements were still several hours away, and if they didn't stop the Zyrans now, they could unleash the parasite on other species, possibly even on the entire galaxy. Falzar had regained some of his strength after taking the cure, though his movements were still slower than usual. The warrior's pride would not allow him to show any weakness, but Elena knew that the parasite's lasting effects had weakened him, perhaps permanently. "We're close," Elena whispered, her voice tight with anticipation. She was holding a data pad, tracking their progress through the Zyran base. "The facility is just ahead. We'll need to be careful." Falzar nodded. "We move quickly then. The Zyrans won't wait for us to make our move." They moved in silence, their steps steady and purposeful. Elena's heart raced with every step. This was it, the moment they had been working toward. The base's security was tight, but Elena's expertise and Falzar's warrior skills had gotten them this far. The hard part was about to begin. As they rounded a corner, Elena held up a hand to signal Falzar to stop. The corridor ahead was lined with heavily armed Zyran soldiers. They were guarding the entrance to a large room where the parasite was being studied. Elena could see the familiar shapes of laboratory equipment through the glass walls. The data they needed to expose the Zyrans' plans was within reach. "We'll need to take them out silently," Elena said, her voice low. "If we can disable the security systems, we can get inside without them knowing." Falzar's golden eyes flashed with understanding. He silently gestured for Elena to stay behind him, and with a quiet, graceful movement, he lunged at the nearest Zyran soldier. The enemy never saw it coming. Falzar moved like a shadow, his massive body an unstoppable force. In seconds, the first soldier was down, and Falzar was already moving to the next one. Elena watched in awe as he moved with precision and power, each strike calculated, each movement a testament to his training. The remaining Zyran soldiers, now alerted to their presence, attempted to raise alarms, but Falzar was faster. He cleared the path with deadly efficiency, his blade cutting through the air with a hum of finality. Once the last of the soldiers was incapacitated, Elena quickly moved forward, using a small device to disable the security systems. She typed in the access codes, bypassing the Zyran encryption with practiced ease. "We've got access," she said, glancing up at Falzar. The door to the laboratory slid open, and they entered the room. The air was filled with the hum of machinery, and the sight of Xiran scientists working with the parasite made Elena's stomach twist. These were the people responsible for the terror they had faced, the people who had weaponized a deadly creature that had nearly killed Thalzar. One of the lead scientists, a tall Xiran with a cruel smile, turned to face them as they entered. "Ah, the human and the Xarnath warrior," the scientist said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Did you really think you could stop us? You're too late." Elena clenched her fists, but Thalzar stepped forward, his voice like a thunderclap. "Your plot ends here." The battle had reached its final stage. The Xarans would not go down easily, but neither would Elena or Thalzar. With a determined look in his eyes, Thalzar raised his weapon, ready to finish what they had started. The fight for survival had led them here, and they would not leave without victory. The laboratory was eerily quiet now, except for the soft hum of the machines. The Xiran scientists had been neutralized, and the plans to weaponize the parasite had been exposed. But there was still one final task left to complete: shutting down the Xiran operation and ensuring that the parasite would never threaten the galaxy again. Dr. Elena Rios wiped the sweat from her brow as she worked quickly, accessing the data terminals. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she refused to let it show. The information she was pulling from the Xiran systems would be critical in stopping future outbreaks of the parasite. With it, the Coalition could learn how to neutralize the parasite and prevent other species from using it as a biological weapon. Behind her, Thalzar stood guard, his massive frame still imposing despite the toll the parasite had taken on him. His golden eyes scanned the room, ever vigilant, ready to strike at a moment's notice. The battle had taken its toll on him. His movements were slower, and his body was not as strong as it once had been. But his spirit was unbroken. "We're almost done," Elena said, her voice steady despite the tension. "Once I upload this data to the Coalition's fleet, they'll have everything they need to stop the Xarans and neutralize the parasite for good." Thalzar turned to face her, his expression serious but grateful. "You have done more than I expected, human. The parasite has no hold on me now, and you have exposed the Xarans' treachery. My people will owe you much for this." Elena smiled faintly, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "I didn't do this for thanks, Commander. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And because I couldn't let you fight alone." Thalzar's golden eyes softened, something in his expression changing. For the first time, Elena saw the vulnerability that had been hidden behind his warrior's pride. "You have earned my respect, human. I once thought your kind weak, unprepared for the harshness of the galaxy. But now, I see that your strength lies in your adaptability, your will to survive, and your ability to fight alongside those who need you." Elena felt her heart swell with pride. It had been a long, difficult journey from their first meeting, and there had been moments when she doubted they would make it. But now, as they stood in the heart of the Xiran base, victorious, she knew that she had proven herself, not just to Thalzar, but to herself as well. "We did this together," she said, her voice quiet but strong. "I couldn't have done it without you." Thalzar nodded. "We will both carry the scars of this fight, but the galaxy will be safer because of our actions. And that is all that matters." The data transfer was complete, and the countdown began. The Xiran facility would be destroyed within minutes, their plans for the parasite wiped from existence. Elena stood up and joined Thalzar at the door, her hand resting on the weapon she had carried since the beginning of this mission. Outside the laboratory, the station was already buzzing with activity. The Coalition fleet would arrive soon, and the Xarans would be dealt with once and for all. For the first time in what felt like forever, Elena allowed herself a moment of peace. "We did it," she whispered. Thalzar looked at her, his eyes filled with quiet pride. "Indeed, human. Together, we did." And as the Xiran base was destroyed in a fiery explosion, Elena knew that this was only the beginning of something far bigger. Their bond, formed in the fires of battle, would carry them through whatever challenges the future might hold. For the first time, Alina believed that humanity had found its place in the galaxy, side by side with warriors like Thalzar, ready to face any enemy, no matter how powerful.